I've seen a few videos now on other content creators' ideas for a Ben 10 video game. Getting into it, my two major influences were Kuro with his video on how a Ben 10 MMO video game could work, as well as Barely Fanatical's video on what if Insomniac made a AAA Ben 10 game. Now both videos had some valid points and I think they were very interesting, so I'll have them both linked in the description. I especially love Kuro's world building and fleshing out of concepts, but for my idea for a Ben 10 video game concept, I wanted to do my own thing. The Ben 10 franchise has always lent itself to having some interesting ideas for video games, so much so that as of 2016, collectively there have been over 11 million total sales of Ben 10 themed spin-off video games. Barely Fanatical's video actually made me sit down and think on what studio's catalogue would most suggest that they're perfect for developing a Ben 10 video game. The first that came to mind was Santa Monica Studios, the people behind the God of War games, but my major concern would be accidentally creating a Protector of Earth reboot. God of War has quite a linear path, and I can see the gameplay loop in a Ben 10 game getting quite repetitive quite quickly. Similar to the gameplay loop of Ben 10 Protector of Earth. You go along a mapped out path, you solve puzzles and fight bosses here and there. Now I do think this game would be a great deal of fun, but if I'm sitting down to plan out my perfect Ben 10 video game, I think I want more out of a game than a functional remake of Protector of Earth, as much fun as that would be. Barely Fanatical's video did a great job at covering how Insomniac would absolutely smash it out of the park, Insomniac being the studio behind the recent Spider-Man games. This just works. You can swap out Peter Parker for Ben, Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery for Ben's, and Spider-Man's supporting cast for Ben 10's supporting cast. It just works. I can find no fault with that whatsoever. Insomniac just consistently puts out fantastic games. But here's where I disagree with Fanatic's video. Sucker Punch Studio would absolutely hit it out of the park with a Ben 10 game. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Infamous series, I wouldn't blame you if you were. I'm relatively unfamiliar with the first two in the franchise. But Infamous Second Son is on a whole new level. As great as the story, characters and world building are, the powers in the gameplay loop that results from that is what really stands out to me. One of the launch titles for the PS4, Infamous Second Son introduces us to a protagonist who's able to take the abilities of other conduits or superhumans throughout the game. Start off with smoke, then neon, then video, and finally concrete at the end of the game. Sorry for any spoilers to anyone who hasn't played it before. With each section of the game revolving around a new conduit being introduced and the protagonist gaining access to their abilities. I think it's pretty clear what I'm getting at here. I'm not always a fan of an open sandbox game, but with the mobility you gain with access to the Omnitrix, those empty spaces would be really easy to navigate through without having it feel like a task to go from one end of the map to the other. More than that, with all the established world building of Ben 10, the world would just be jam-packed with familiar locations, characters, and interesting areas. As far as the world of the game goes, I'd have it take place in Bellwood, keeping the city a small to medium size, but dense, with the player being able to go in between the surface and undertown through access points. For the art style, I'm torn between a sort of cel-shaded omniverse-inspired look or a more realistic, lighting-heavy Infamous-like look, taking some visual language from the Heroes United design to blend better with this world. I'd want to add a reasonable level of character customization. I'd say that you can change the appearance of your Omnitrix, selecting from any Omnitrix we've seen in the series, as well as adjusting the colour scheme. Maybe you can choose from any outfit we see Ben wear in the series, although I do still want it to be Ben. I don't want it to be too customizable, just for the plot reasons we'll get into. Now for the story. You'd begin the game with a tutorial level where you have access to all sorts of transformations, the player deciding which ones to use. It'd be a chase through the city at night with Ben, Gwen and Kevin chasing down a Tetraman. Let's say it's Luma. Now as Luma's being loaded into the back of a plumber van, the Omnitrix starts to play out. It's a bit cliche at this point to have an interference with the Omnitrix, but I'm going to go with that. No longer connected to the codon stream, meaning there's no DNA inside the Omnitrix. We look to the sky and see there's some kind of energy field surrounding the Earth with a slight, dim, purpley glow. Narratively, this is what causes the disconnect between the Omnitrix and the codon stream. Visually, it just would give a nice ambient light when you're playing through the game. From here, Ben's Omnitrix flickers yellow, entering the DNA sequence, scanning Luma and giving Ben access to his first transformation, Forearms. From here, we quickly discover the Rooters have made their way back from the Null Void, scattering strongholds around the city, having a heap more amalgam recruits of various alien species. Let's say the Rooters are spreading this message that they're taking over Earth to protect it from alien threats, meanwhile trapping all the alien inhabitants of Earth here, with a matter of time before they track them all down. Really, they just want to round them all up in order to create an army of amalgam kids to join their side. Plan to use that army to take out Ben and then maybe take over the universe. So now you've got a disgruntled and fearful alien population of Earth being rounded up and captured by an army of Rooters. Let's say each outpost of the game would have one of the established Rooters as the leader and boss fight, with a scattering of Rooter soldiers as grunts, with Rooter-grunt hybrids being the sort of heavy or above average strength enemies. You traverse the game finding familiar characters, gathering allies and scanning aliens as you bump into them. At some point in the game you'd find out the incursions were also planning an invasion, with the Tay being trapped on Earth, her ship entering right before the energy field went up, with the Armada trapped outside. There'd also be a side story across the game with Albedo, who's also lost his connection to the codon stream, having his own hidden outpost that he's already taken over, using the already rounded up aliens as a way to reacquire DNA for his Ultimatrix. And another side story would include an off-map unlockable area at Gwen's college, where you'd bump into some of the Anor system aliens, Hex, Charmcaster and Michael Morningstar. I'd say this would be a few hours of gameplay towards the end of the game. So the game would start with a tutorial, the loss of all the alien DNA from the Omnitrix, the unlocking of Forearms, the introduction of the Rooters. You'd explore the world for a bit, align yourself with various allies. You'd work your way through Rooter strongholds, scanning the DNA of the aliens held captive by the Rooters. You take those bases on one at a time, bumping into other villains along the way, with the final base being unlocked after you defeated all the other outposts, taking on Cervantes. This is where we discover that he's been holding Agrigor captive, forcibly using him in the same way he used Kevin, with Agrigor's DNA slowly falling apart, being forced to create amalgams on a production line. You then fight Cervantes and his new hit squad of top-tier rooters, freeing Agrigor and disabling the energy field. From there, I imagine there'd be a post-game cutscene where Ben's sitting down at Mr. Smoothies with all his friends, looking to the sky, seeing the incursion's forces coming in, Vilgax's ship as well, and let's just say another big tick has landed just to really drive that idea home. Now giving you a post-game with more enemies and new side quests to play through, now with an entirely restored Omnitrix. Thanks for watching.